Greetings, passionate about space exploration and curious about the cosmos. In a world flooded with information, we often come across erroneous data or myths that have been widely accepted. Today, on this exciting journey through space, we are going to dive into the vast immensity of the universe to explore 10 misleading claims from space. Have you ever wondered if the moon is really made of cheese or if space is completely silent? Have you questioned whether astronauts can see stars from space? Join us to unmask the myths of space. Let's get started. Number 1. Our sun is nothing like this. Rather, to this. If you've always believed that our star is a bright yellow fireball, you're wrong. First of all, the sun is not yellow but green. Or something like that. Scientists calculate a star's temperature based on the color spectrum it emits. Each color has its own wavelength, and this is what astronomers measure to determine how hot a star is. The coldest ones look red, while the hottest ones look blue. Our sun emits its energy at a wavelength closer to green. But, as it simultaneously emits other wavelengths, all the colors combine and your eyes interpret that vibrant mixture as white. This would be if you observed the sun from the International Space Station. From here on Earth, the sun looks yellow because the atmosphere is quite effective at scattering blue light. Without the blue wavelengths, the remaining colors produce yellow. If our star were actually yellow, it would be about 800 degrees Celsius cooler. The habitable zone would be narrower and the Earth would become a cold dead rock. And this isn't the only thing you've been lied to about space. Number 2. The sun is hot, but it does not catch fire. Fire is a chemical reaction between oxygen and a fuel. Like most stars in the universe, our sun is a giant ball of gas, primarily made of hydrogen and helium. It has almost no oxygen. Instead, it works more like a huge nuclear reactor, constantly fusing hydrogen atoms and creating helium in its core. This process releases enormous amounts of energy, which gives the sun its very high temperature. Speaking of setting things on fire, let me tell you about explosions in space. That's right, they are not real. A spaceship cannot expel a violent flare because there is no air in the vacuum of space. Or rather, there is no oxygen, which means, as you know, there is no fire. Star Wars fans, I'm so sorry. Number 3. It may seem like there are too many stars in the night sky to count. But, actually, you could do it. However, Harvard scientists got ahead of themselves. According to the Yale Bright Star Catalog, there are 9,110 stars observable with the naked eye from Earth. Now, try to count them yourself. Number 4. The movies have led us to believe that only an extremely skilled pilot can cross the asteroid belt, which is not true. The ring is not some kind of lethal obstacle course. Although yes, it has trillions of space rocks ranging in size from space dust to a quarter the size of the moon. About 100,000 of these asteroids are more than 1 kilometer wide, but they are widely spread across space. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter has a diameter of 225 million kilometers. That is, 1.5 times the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Therefore, the rocks are millions of kilometers away from each other. It would be almost impossible for a spaceship to collide with one of them. Number 5. If you were launched from the decompression chamber of a ship into the vastness of space, you wouldn't immediately turn into a popsicle. The reason is that in order to freeze, a temperature transfer between space and your body has to occur. But heat and cold don't travel very fast in the vacuum of space. Your body would freeze, but it would take hours to do so. When it happens, you will be dead for a long time for another reason. And no, you won't explode in space either. But you will bloat, because the nitrogen in your bloodstream will clump together, swelling you to twice your size. However, this is not what will kill you. Lack of oxygen will do it. After 15 seconds in space, your brain will not receive enough oxygen from the blood and you will lose consciousness. Within 2 minutes of floating in space, your organs will shut down one by one. Number 6. Space seems extremely cold, but it is not. In reality, there is no such thing as temperature. Temperature is defined as the speed at which particles move and the amount of energy they carry. In the vacuum of space, there are no particles that can move. Therefore, space lacks temperature. Of course, outer space is not an absolute vacuum. It contains particles and radiation that produce heat, and certain areas of space are very hot, starting with those around stars. But the further you get from them, the more dispersed the particles will be, which makes those areas of space extremely icy. Some dense gas clouds can reach -263 degrees Celsius. Number 7. Despite being the closest planet to the Sun, Mercury is not the hottest. Even so, it is still extreme. During the day, its surface temperature rises to 430 degrees Celsius, while at night it drops to -180 degrees Celsius. So, the most hellish planet in our solar system is Venus. What happens is that Mercury does not have an atmosphere that retains the heat it receives from the Sun, contrary to that of Venus, which is quite thick and produces a greenhouse effect. It's like our global warming, but enhanced, turning Venus into an unbearable hell with surface temperatures around 475 degrees Celsius. Number 8. Our entire solar system does not remain still in one place in the galaxy. It is flying through space at 220 kilometers per second. That is, 7 times the speed with which the Earth rotates around the Sun. It takes the solar system 230 million years to completely orbit the Milky Way. The last time we passed by where we are now, Earth had a single supercontinent and dinosaurs were just starting to roam around. Number 9. The planets do not orbit the Sun. Everything that makes up our solar system is in balance. And although the Sun is the most massive object in our planetary neighborhood, there are other planets that participate in this gravitational tug-of-war. Instead of orbiting the Sun, planets and moons revolve around a central point between them and our star. Such a point is known as the barycenter. In the case of the Earth, its barycenter is so close to the core of the Sun and it doesn't make much difference. But for Jupiter, that point is about 55,000 kilometers from the center of the Sun. This means that the gas giant and the Sun are orbiting each other. Number 10. From outer space, the Earth looks round, although it is actually an irregularly shaped ellipsoid. It swells at the equator due to the centrifugal force caused by the planet's rotation. As a result, the Earth is about 43 kilometers wider at the equator than at the poles. This makes the gravity slightly lower in the swollen part, facilitating the launch of space rockets from equatorial regions instead of near the poles. Number 11. In space, no one will be able to hear you scream. This is true, but to a certain extent. Sound requires a medium to travel. But in space the molecules are very far apart, so the sounds fade away before they go very far. All the cosmic catastrophes, supernovas and black holes crashing into each other fall silent before you can hear them. However, there are places in space with enough particles to carry sound, such as the cloud of hot gas around the black hole at the center of the Perseus galaxy cluster. The accumulation of gas is such that you can actually hear the black hole. Of course, other planets make noise too. If you could hear them, do you know what they would sound like? Number 12. Neil Armstrong had a strange encounter while on the moon and kept it hidden from everyone else for more than 50 years. The commander of Apollo 11 is among the legends of NASA when it comes to space travel, due to the feat he achieved by becoming the first man to set foot on the lunar surface on July 20, 1969. We are all aware of this historical experience. However, there is one event in particular that was hidden from the public. While on the moon, Armstrong encountered something that almost prevented the Apollo 11 mission from returning home. He kept it a secret until his death. What did the first man on the moon hide from us? The first moon landing has slowly become the realm of American mythology. This achievement was so astonishing that the decade of space travel was concentrated in a single event. It almost seems like on a summer day in 1969, 3 men boarded a rocket, traveled to the moon, put on their spacesuits, walked around, and planted the American flag before returning home. However, that was not all that happened. Neil Armstrong found something that he kept secret, but that was eventually revealed when he died. Before Neil Armstrong could take his small step for man on July 20, 1969, he and the rest of the Apollo 11 crew went through a rigorous training process to prepare for their lunar mission. Although much of their training took place at testing facilities and in the classroom, NASA also assigned astronauts tasks, such as collecting geological samples. They also trained entering and exiting the lunar module to help build muscle memory and replicate these procedures on the moon. To make the team's training as realistic as possible, the crew trained at select sites here on Earth that looked eerily similar to lunar topography. NASA was searching for locations similar to the moon, and astronauts trained at various locations in the United States and abroad to learn about the geological features they would encounter on their mission. The field training was highlighted because NASA wanted the astronauts to learn the muscle memory steps to collect samples and take photographs without wasting time. They practiced collecting and analyzing soil and rock samples at multiple sites, as well as digging trenches and collecting samples at different levels. Selecting locations and collecting samples, they practiced describing geologic features verbally and in writing, documenting sites with photographs, and labeling samples. NASA turned analog missions into a regular training tool for astronauts. During the landing of Apollo 11, Neil and Armstrong faced a problem when the computer indicated an error code 1202 and they did not know its origin. Controllers in Houston searched for the problem as tension grew on the lunar module. Communication was failing, the computer was having problems, and the flight director was worried about the control center's lack of power. The problems began after the separation of the command module, with radio link problems. The flight director admitted to making decisions about how much information was sufficient. The order was given to begin powered descent and rocket brake landing, but communication was lost. Armstrong tried to fix the problem, but the radio connection kept failing. If the situation worsened, the mission would have to be aborted. Meanwhile, several alarms were activated in the lunar module cockpit, including the overload alarm, which indicated an overload if the landing computer was reset. Due to this alarm, they would have to abort the mission instantly. Flight controllers on Earth were dealing with communication issues and intermittent radar data during the lunar landing. The computer received too much data, which caused an unknown alarm in the lunar module. Flight controllers on Earth made the decision to continue with the landing as long as the alarm did not repeat itself constantly. Despite another similar alarm, the astronauts went ahead with the landing, focused on the instruments, and Armstrong controlling the landing manually. However, a new problem arose: his location was not as planned. Armstrong suggested thinking about powered descent, but then lost communication. He tried to fix it without success. If it got worse, they would have to abort. The master alarm sounded and the landing computer indicated an oxygen overload during landing. Neil Armstrong asked Houston for clarification about the alarm sounding in the cockpit. Mission controller Steve Bales decided it was safe to continue as long as the alarm was irregular. They decided to continue with the landing, since it was almost as dangerous to attempt an abort with a faulty computer as it was to continue. Fellow astronaut Charlie Duke relayed the message into space, saying, "We continue to raise that alarm." Even though the computer issued another alarm, they decided to continue during landing. They were focused on the instrument displays and Armstrong was in manual control of the landing. However, another problem was slowly beginning to appear. They were not where they were supposed to be. Armstrong remembered that in the commander's window there was a grid calibrated at his height, which allowed him to check his position on the moon. However, the irregular gravity of the moon and the extra speed acquired when they unhooked from the command module caused them to overshoot the planned landing zone. Armstrong had a poor view of a vast field of craters and rocks the size of trucks, rather than the smooth, flat area shown on the orbital map. Piloting manually, he looked for a soft place to land. During the lunar landing, Armstrong and his crew were nervous due to the strange trajectory and low fuel level, which meant they had to abort within 60 seconds. Armstrong looked for a soft spot while he calculated speed and range. After landing, the crew went through their checklist, but a pressure buildup was observed in the consoles. The situation was reported and they considered aborting the mission, but the heat from the engine melted the ice and the problem was resolved. After 3 hours on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin attempted to open the lunar module hatch after completing their checklist. However, they discovered that they could not get all the air out of the LEM and that there was still too much pressure. After several attempts, Aldrin had to peel the edge of the hatch to open it without breaking it. As Armstrong exited the module, something broke, turning out to be the ascent engine arming switch, presenting another dangerous problem for the mission. Buzz Aldrin noticed something unusual on the floor of the lunar module as he prepared to leave for the lunar surface. He discovered it was a broken circuit breaker that had become dislodged from the vital ascent motor arming switch. He realized that he and Armstrong must have accidentally hit the switch with their large backpacks while trying to exit the lunar module door. The circuit breaker was broken and needed to be pushed back so the climb motor could turn on and take them back home. Houston couldn't find a solution, so they inserted a pen into the opening of the broken circuit breaker to push it in and hold it in place, thus ensuring the operation of the climb motor if the motor arming circuit breaker fails had closed. Armstrong and his crew would have been trapped on the moon. In case the pen had not worked to fix the broken circuit breaker, Mission Control and the crew would have looked for other ways to close the circuit and start the ascent engine. After valves fixed the broken circuit switch with a felt-tip pen, it was decided to keep a guard on those switches on later lunar modules. Despite how improvised the arrangement was, the ascent engine was successfully ignited and the astronauts were able to return to Earth. Aldrin still keeps the broken switch and pen he used, while Armstrong kept a bag full of small pieces from the Eagle lunar module. After Armstrong's death in 2012, his widow gave the storage bag to the National Air and Space Museum in Washington. The curator of space artifacts found Neil Armstrong's wallet exciting, as it contained valuable items from the lunar mission, such as the safety rope, equipment supports, lights, and an emergency wrench. It also included the optical sight and camera that recorded iconic images of the lunar landing. Armstrong kept the bag secret for more than 40 years, and although the bag and its contents were moved to the command module before the lunar module crashed on the lunar surface to prevent its destruction, it is not known how Armstrong obtained the bag. After the mission, the fact that Armstrong hid artifacts from the space mission, even from his wife, is unknown and raises questions about his motives. As for the mention that Armstrong and his moon team broke some rules by bouncing off a part of the moon to take pictures of some interesting rocks, that's baseless speculation. There is no evidence that the photos turned out to be of extraterrestrial origin. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey through the universe and its amazing complexity. If you like this content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.